Hello there and welcome once again to the Mayor's Magazine. I'm Mick Cornett, the Mayor of Oklahoma City. Glad you're with us. This is our show for August 2015. And as we wind up the summer, we're going to bring in a couple of people, or three people actually, who are helping to shape the way Oklahoma City looks toward the future. And with us, first of all, is Aubrey Hammontree, who runs our planning department. Welcome to the Mayor's Magazine.
Thanks for having me.
You and your staff, as well as dozens, if not hundreds, of Oklahoma City citizens, are finishing up what's called the comprehensive plan. And that's kind of a boring term for what is really a very important document or series of documents. So kind of explain, if you could, to the layperson what a comprehensive plan is and why it's important.
Well, it's a guide for how we plan and grow our city. So it's a very long-range type of plan. It covers all different topics that we have to deal with every day. How we get around our transportation network, it deals with our economic development, it deals with our housing and neighborhood needs, city services. So it's basically all the pieces of a community that you have to think about and how a community grows over time. So it sets that plan for the future, and it's something that we use to guide the decisions that we make on a day-to-day basis for our city.
Why should the typical suburbanite in Oklahoma City care? How is this impacting them?
I think everybody that lives in Oklahoma City has a basic expectation for a certain quality of life. Mm-hmm. They want to be able to live somewhere, be able to get around, be able to shop where they want to shop, have great schools, have great recreational amenities, have opportunities.
Yeah,
so,
because a plan it affects you in kind of secondary ways. In other words, if the traffic has clogged and there's so much congestion you can't get to work, it could be that a better plan or a different plan might have been able to alleviate that at one time or another.
Right. That's what we've seen. We've learned lots of lessons because I consider Oklahoma City a young city. When you look around at cities across the country that have been around, for much longer, places in other places in the world, they've kind of settled into a certain pattern. The development is kind of locked in, the infrastructure is locked in, but we're still growing. And all of those incremental changes as they happen do affect our day-to-day lives. So that's why it's really important to get that plan together and be thinking about and guiding where the development goes and how you deal with it on that incremental day-to-day decision-making basis.
If you look back at Oklahoma City's history, obviously there was the land run and then they settled the city in this very defined area, kind of a square or a rectangle. And then, by 1910, it was the capital city, and they were building a capitol, and they were building it way on the edge of the city at 23rd Street. Mm-hmm. And it seems like ever since then, we've just expanded and expanded and expanded and expanded. And so that's the term urban sprawl is typically used to describe that. Can you explain to, again, to the average person who's sitting out there watching the show, why that's a good or a bad thing? What are the impacts of urban sprawl?
Well, I think that the people that were in charge at the time when that land was available for Oklahoma City to grab it thought it was a really good thing. They thought, we're in this great crux between these two interstate highways. We're going to be able to capture all of the business and the sales tax, and we're going to be able to have this wonderful city that's, we can grow and grow and grow. And that is a good thing if you have tons of money and tons of resources and you can follow that growth and keep up with it. So we were kind of a victim of our own success in that people wanted to live here and we grew really fast. But where it starts to concern us is when we put out too much ahead and we're not able to catch back up. So for the comprehensive plan, it's trying to manage and guide the pace of that growth so that people don't get into those problems with too much congestion or not enough response time on police and fire. Mm-hmm. So I think that we've done a really good job as we've grown in creating great neighborhoods and great communities, and it's at this point in our growing up as a city that we have the opportunity to shape that.
Mm-hmm. What are we trying to encourage? How would you describe what we hope happens for Oklahoma City?
We have done an excellent job through a lot of I call it the perfect storm, where we had maps. Unfortunately, the Murrah disaster ended up giving us a little bit of a breath of revitalization in our downtown, so we've strengthened our downtown to a place to where now the neighborhoods that are immediately around downtown and those areas that had been skipped over or not quite fully developed out have opportunities to infill, to start creating more quality of life options for that central part of Oklahoma City. We have great neighborhoods on the periphery, we have great rural areas with acreages and farms, but we've got a lot of places that we've kind of missed developing. So I think the next wave of Oklahoma City is going to be to start filling in those pockets that were passed over in the last couple of decades.
Yeah. What's the advantage of density?
It's the efficiency of services, period. It is more people, more opportunity. You get competition. You're able to provide more for less. So density can have some negatives too. You've got to manage people. You've got to manage cars. But with it comes all other kinds of things. You start to become more bikeable and more walkable and more things to do, more opportunities.
Some people, when they deal with the planning department, sometimes it's their definition of red tape. You know, I want to open a barber shop, and so I want to build it, and I want to do it, and you have to start with the planning department. What happens then? Kind of take somebody through the process. Somebody wants to build a building, start a retail business, and they enter your office or your staff's office, and the steps that are in process before that building can get the go-ahead.
That's a great question. We get it all the time. One tool that we have with the comprehensive plan now that we didn't have before is that if anybody is just looking for what is it going to take for me to start a business or for me to look for a location, they can go to our website at okc.gov and go to PlanOKC and click on that site. And then the site will pull up what the city's expectation is for that area, what type of development's appropriate in it. You can look up what you're zoned to be able to do, legally able to do. If you need to change that zoning and you need to come in and ask permission to do something different with the land, then we can walk them through the process of going through that. And all of those steps do have to be measured against what the comprehensive plan is asking people to develop and build. The thing that's different about the comprehensive plan that then is about zoning is the comprehensive plan is a guide, whereas zoning is the law. So people are entitled to build certain things based on the law, based on their zoning district, and the plan might ask for something different. So it's a conversation. A lot of times you have to kind of work on a strategy for making it the best development you can make it. And that involves Planning Commission and City Council and the public in that process as well.
Obviously, we're at an encouraging time because in general, there's a market for development in Oklahoma City. I mean, it might be hard to imagine today, but, you know, there's been times in Oklahoma City's history when, you know, there wasn't construction going on of any large scale. You know, businesses weren't expanding. There were more, you know, lots and green spaces being created than they were, you know, the infill that you talked about earlier. There wasn't, you know, housing construction going on. Now we have kind of the opposite of that, kind of a building boom that's going on. How does that affect the planning department staff? Because, you know, to a certain extent, you've got to handle a lot more opportunities for Oklahoma City than might have existed, you know, 10 or 20 years ago.
We do. We couldn't be any busier. It's great to see all the cranes in the air, and it's great to have the highest number of applications than we've ever processed before. I like having that problem. It means we have to be more efficient with our services and with our time, but as we work with people, we're finding better systems, better ways, we're utilizing technology in a better way. So we're growing as the market's growing, and I think that we're becoming better serving people because we want to facilitate good development.
And if people think, after hearing you talk, that sounds like a fun career, what educational direction should people go in to work in a planning department at the municipal level? There's
a lot of different backgrounds that people come into the planning profession from. Planning is a very diverse field. And we have people who have studied public administration, geography, geology, landscape architecture, urban design, but there is actually a degree field for urban planning, urban and regional planning. So most of the people who come into the profession come from that background. But we encourage people with lots of different backgrounds and fields of expertise to study or to come on board in the planning department. I think it's great perspective.
All right. She is Aubrey Hammontree. Thank you very much for
Thanks
coming
for
on the Mayor's Magazine, running our planning department so capably. We'll have more on the Mayor's Magazine right after this.
It's outdoor time in Oklahoma, and that means it's time to go out on adventures with family and friends. With dazzling Friday night sunset cruises or fun-themed Saturday cruises like luau, disco, and bluegrass, the only question is, which cruise will you choose? Oklahoma River Cruises has 4 convenient landings to cruise from Regatta Park, Exchange Landing, Meridian Landing, and Bricktown Landing, all along the beautiful Oklahoma River in Oklahoma City. There's cruises for everyone, from families, girls' night out, or history buffs. But the best way to find the river cruise for you is to come down and try it yourself. For more information, cruise schedules, and tickets, visit okrivercruises.com.
Welcome back to the Mayor's Magazine. I'm Mick Cornett. We're wrapping up this show of the Mayor's Magazine for August 2015. I thought it would be good to remind the citizens of Oklahoma City just how involved our citizens are in the execution of the MAPS 3 plan. As you'll recall, in MAPS 3, we're going to build a downtown streetcar, a new park, a new convention center, making improvements on the river and at the fairgrounds. We're building sidewalks and trails, and we're building senior wellness centers. And we're doing all of that under the watchful eyes of citizen subcommittees and an advisory board. And in this segment, I thought I'd invite Nathaniel Harding over, who is both the chair of the subcommittee for the modern streetcar and also serves on the advisory board. So thanks for coming on, Nathaniel.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and you know, it really is a big responsibility to be representing the watchful eyes of so many. I mean, literally hundreds of thousands of people live in Oklahoma City, and to be asked to serve as a, on a citizen watch bureau for hundreds of millions of dollars a project is a project you probably took a big gulp before you said yes.
Right, and it's quite a commitment. You know, we started meeting in 2010, and the schedule goes through 2020 and beyond. So it's
you didn't know it was a lifetime
small thing.
assignment when
Right.
you signed up, did you? Well, talk about the makeup of the specific streetcar, the modern streetcar, and what the assignment is to the subcommittee that's looking at all of those options.
Sure. So the idea of a modern streetcar is it travels along with traffic. The rails are embedded in the street, and so it doesn't have a dedicated right-of-way, so it's very flexible. It has overhead wires. There's also some wireless technology, and it integrates very well with vehicles. And some people call it a pedestrian accelerator. And so it has frequent stops. It comes frequently, and it stops every 2 to 4, maybe 5 blocks at most. And so it's very well designed for a denser urban environment where you're trying to move around downtown without having to constantly pay for parking, move over a few blocks to the restaurant or the next amenity and do it over.
And as you and I understand it, Oklahoma City once had a streetcar. I mean, it was gone by the time we came along, but it's not totally new technology at Oklahoma City.
That's right. So we had streetcar for decades, and a lot of the shapes of our streets are that way because of the streetcar. And so really mid-century is when it had its kind of last turn, and now it's being revived. And we're not the only city that's doing this. A lot of cities are realizing that we had something great. You know, the cities that had a streetcar, it was a really good technology. There's certainly newer versions of it that are even more efficient, quieter, and can have less wires. And so cities are welcoming them back, and the user is welcoming them as well.
You brought up a good point in your previous answer, because you talked about, it's kind of a pedestrian aid. In other words, you wouldn't think, if we're trying to increase pedestrian access and trying to get people out walking, that we'd give them a reason to ride. But in actuality, because our downtown area is so large, you literally can't walk from one end of downtown or the other in most weather conditions. But with a streetcar, it could accentuate your ability to get around. So it really is an enhancement to a pedestrian-friendly environment.
Right, and the analogy that I give, some people may think of a commuter rail, which has very infrequent stops and goes very long distance, but it's a little bit more like you would see maybe a tram at an airport, where you're getting from the end of one terminal to another. You're not going to walk the 20, 30 minutes to get there, but of course you would hop on a tram in that case to do that. So same kind of thing with the streetcar. You may work downtown, but you want to have lunch in Midtown or Bricktown, or you might want to stay afterwards for a basketball game at the Chesapeake Arena. And so you can easily hop on a streetcar, go several blocks, and hop off. The entire day, your car stays in one spot until it's time to go home.
Mm-hmm. And we mentioned you serve as the chair of the subcommittee for the streetcar, but you're also on the advisory board, and the advisory board overlooks all of the MAPS 3 projects, not just the streetcar. So talk about that phase of your public involvement.
So that's been very educational, a lot of fun to see these things come about. And right now, a lot of the MAPS projects are beginning their construction phase. So for the first couple of years, we were raising money, because it's raising money before you spend it, which is a great model.
Yeah,
about
raising money by
maps.
collecting tax dollars, basically.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And then it's the engineering phase, which some projects are still in some engineering phase of planning. But a lot of construction starts. There's been a lot of ribbon cutting ceremonies and things where the public turns out, and you see huge support for these projects. And it's a lot of fun for a citizen such as myself to visit with other people that live in my ward, and they know that I'm involved, so they ask me questions about it. And it's always neat to see what they're excited about. They're really excited about the trail, or about the Boathouse District developments, or the convention center. And everybody has something that they are really looking forward to seeing happening. And now the construction is happening, and it's becoming a very, very real near-term goal.
Are there, amongst the 8 projects, is there one or two that you think are really going to exceed the expectations of the voters?
I think the whitewater facility at the Boathouse District, just because there's really no expectation. There's almost nothing else like it in the country, certainly nothing else like it in our region. There's no analogy. And so when I try to explain it to people, they just kind of stare at me blankly. So I wanted to be here so I can just point to it, and I think that's going to really impress a lot of people.
And you know, a good analogy might be the canal that's in Bricktown. When it was first discussed, there was even talk about it being part of the biology of the river. Just kind of move the river and let a channel go through downtown and then go back the river. They realized with elevation and some engineering reviews that really wasn't a good idea, and so they came up with what we have now, which is really kind of an amusement park ride, kind of a big bathtub with water that flows and people ride. But I think when it was voted on in December of '93, the average citizen had really no idea of the impact of that canal, how it would shape downtown, how it would create a postcard, and how much of what we envision Oklahoma City today, is kind of based on that vision. And so I think you're right. I think it's a very astute observation to say when MAPS 3 is all said and done, we'll have a bigger and better convention center, and we'll have a bigger and better building down at the fairgrounds, and all those things are great, and growing the economy and allowing us to have police officers and firefighters and all of those good things. But there's some things that are just very unique and difference makers. And I think several elements of MAPS 3 take that as well. Can you talk about the feedback you're getting on the sidewalks and trails? Because again, this is something that really wasn't. It was kind of really something that when we put it into MAPS, I think a lot of people thought, well, I don't necessarily know how that's going to affect me.
Yeah, I know the opening ceremony was recently, and I think you led a large group of cyclists.
Oh, on the new trail
on the
out
new
west,
trail,
yeah.
Right? And it had a huge turnout. I've heard estimates, in the hundreds that turned out for the opening of the new trail. And the sidewalks is another story. It seems like whenever there's a good development with the sidewalk, they say, oh, thank God for MAPS, even if it's not necessarily a MAPS project, because the sidewalks impact everybody. Everybody. Talk about walkability, man, that's kind of the very first step. Is you need to be able to get from your neighborhood to the local commercial district or whatever it is. And so that's been a very tangible impact. That's probably the very first thing that I hear from people, whether they live near downtown or in a far suburb.
What type of decisions or opinions do you get to exert as part of the advisory board or subcommittee? What's your input into the process?
So it's a lot of the things that come through the subcommittee. Subcommittee usually would see them first, the engineering design or a decision to make, and then we would offer our recommendation, pass it on to the oversight board that has everybody representing the wards, and then that pass on recommendation to City Council. And so, but it's a very collaborative process because we have a member of City Council that sits on the oversight board, and that person almost always comes to the subcommittee meetings as well. And we, of course, want to make sure that the things we're putting forward fit the long-term vision. And so yourself and members of City Council have been very open with sharing what that vision is and building it together. And so that way, the citizens, when we go back to the drawing board and look over a design criteria or try to make a decision on something that's very specific and very minute, it fits into the overall vision that we've bought into. And I think that process, it's an effective process, and I think it results in the best decisions.
A lot of construction going on in MAPS 3 right now, most famously at the fairgrounds, and you mentioned down on the river. Construction probably a year away or so on the streetcar, and maybe a little bit longer on the convention center, but it won't be long. And I think we'll break ground later this summer on the first wellness center. And I think again, when those are open, I think people are really going to enjoy them and see how it meets a need in our ever-growing community and the baby boom generation that's getting older. But I think MAPS 3 is going to be a real difference maker and be a catalyst for whatever the city becomes here in the next 10 or 20 years. And hopefully you'll stick around Oklahoma City and retire here and be here a long time from now and can look back and remember fondly your involvement in those MAPS 3 projects. And I hope that's the payment for the volunteer services that you've expended here over the last few years. Nathaniel Harding is the MAPS 3 subcommittee chair and also serves on the advisory board. Just one of 80 citizen subcommittee or advisory board volunteers who are helping to shape MAPS 3 for the future. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Mayor's Magazine. Glad you're with us. We'll be back next month with another show, and I'll see you then.